What's up, y'all? For anybody who's wondering how fraud and AI are intersecting and empowering bad actors, this is going to be a great episode for you to listen in on. Today's guests are Gino, Angeli, and Mike Dunleavey, both from Laser Credit Access. And these guys are seeing this happen in the wild, and they have some real-world scenarios to share with us. We also get into the current state of lending and why it still feels so clunky, and why many lending origination systems feel like when you're looking at the UI, you're sitting in a 747 cockpit. Check out the interview. You know, the first lending origination system came out actually in the 80s, believe it or not, but it still feels so clunky. And so many of these lending origination systems, when you look at the UI, I feel like I'm sitting in a 747 cockpit. Why is it that the lending experience is still so clunky? What's your take on that, Mike?
Well, I'll just give my 2 cents. Generally, especially in the banking business, it's legacy systems. It's the massive, tech stack that they have that they just struggle to get together. And for that reason, you get to a certain point underwriting a transaction, then you have to go out and do something else. In banking, there's still a lot of that. On the other side, it is become complicated for lenders to corral everything in one place. So what we, try to do is get them to a point right now. Is that someone we can do business with? And there are a lot of systems out there that you can take it in Salesforce, or you can create your final underwriting steps from that data. Gino, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, what I would add to that, and kind of getting back to Roland, what you talked about earlier on, a lot of people think of Salesforce as like a sales platform, right? Not a loan management platform. And you're right, in some industries, there still is a legacy LOS at play, and Salesforce is operating on the front end, but we've seen a lot more platforms trying to gear it for the full suite so that you're containing everything in one system. And I think that speaks to how we kind of fit into just the first part of the process. So if you think about loan products, right, they are products and they require salespeople. That's that application to getting the documentation needed to close the loan. And then sometimes it is going out to a different LOS platform, but a lot of the time they are handling that processing, disbursement, servicing at the side of Salesforce. So to the question of why or is it so clunky, a lot of the platforms that were built, like you said, 1985 or whatever, that's like, they look like that. They look like an old Windows 95 server. But, a lot of companies are just stuck on it. It's kind of ransomware to some extent because that's where all their data is housed, and migrating away from it can be tricky.
It's the devil they know.
It is the devil they know.
So let's talk a little bit about the type of organizations that you work with. So, CDFIs, equipment finance companies, banks, specialty lenders. Are these guys all more or less struggling with the same bottlenecks and pain points?
I would say that there's differences across varying lending industries. For example, a CDFI is going to be a nonprofit. They're frequently working with more impoverished groups or those who might not have as established credit, things of that nature. They're obviously going to have a different set of requirements and things than an equipment financer who's primarily doing larger syndicated deals and is looking at business or commercial credit in that respect. At the end of the day, they still both need the credit report in, but how do they utilize it is going to be different between those two groups.
Fair enough. Talk to me about change fatigue or implementation fatigue. I feel like this has got to be one of the biggest challenges at any organization where they have human beings having to learn new things. How do you guys try to position and structure your implementation in a way that doesn't blow the wheels off the wagon with your customers?
Yeah. We kind of deal with two groups of people when we're onboarding. One is people who have an established Salesforce process, right? They've been using it for X amount of time. The other one is somebody that's migrating over to Salesforce or a new business that's just getting started. In those settings where it's a new business or they're migrating over, they are going to have a big consulting group that's going to be setting up a lot of that for them. And usually we work hand in hand with them to make it as white glove as possible. We're bringing in the data. We simply ask them, what do you want the process to look like here? And where are you going to need this data? They say, oh, it's usually after the opportunity stage changes to, this. So we make sure that the data is pulled in there. We make sure the consultant is aware of what actual data is coming in, the liabilities, obviously credit scores, things of that nature. And then they can kind of take it and run and develop from there. In the case that somebody has already been on the platform for quite some time, it's usually much, I don't want to say faster to set up, but they have a set process, right? And how they go from application to close. It's usually like, oh, we know exactly where we need it. We just didn't even know that this was possible, right? We've still just been to the credit reporting agency. Like they log into Experian, they run the consumer file, then they upload it. And then even in some cases, we have people that have built their own API directly to the bureaus. It's pulling in the PDF, but they're still having to look through that PDF, sift through it, do a bunch of math, and try to figure it out from there. That's part of the value proposition that I'd like to believe we bring is all the data is parsed out and relatively standardized across different vendors. So they can build reliable automation on top of those fields and hopefully mitigate a lot of those challenges that they might run into otherwise.
Got it. So Gino, you're running partnerships, Outlaser Credit Access. How do you build and develop the channel and relationship with Salesforce?
Yeah, we got to make win-win-win situations. So what that means to me, and I know that sounds obvious, right? Partnerships, everybody's making win-win-wins. But it's like...
That's the goal.
Yeah, that is the goal. So what that typically looks like is on the side of the consultant, they're able to, one, seem like they are knowledgeable about the industry experts in the space. Oh, you need something done? I know a person for it. Because oftentimes, they're a master of implementations, not a jack of all trades. We similarly stay in our lane. This is all we focus on, and people know us for doing that really well. So they benefit in that way. And then also all of the data that we're bringing in, as I mentioned earlier, it's parsed. And from that, they can do a lot of additional development work, right? So it's making a very customized platform specific to that lender's needs. Now, the lender is benefiting because they're getting a amazing platform that they can handle every part of the loan they need on. And then we're able to obviously provide good product and service.
I like that. Win-win-win makes sense. I was a partner guy in the past, and in the beginning, partnerships, when you're first getting them fired up, everybody's looking at things with kind of rose-tinted glasses on. We're going to be doing this and winning here and there, and my portfolio is, going to complement yours and vice versa. But then once you actually get into, managing the channel with a Salesforce, with a Meridian link, with a Fiserv, whatever, there's so much minutia that goes into it, like just go to market.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think Mike or I are huge fans of you have to send us a deal before we send you a deal. I think we benefit a lot more when it's like something comes up and we are in the position where they say, you know what, I know somebody that can do that. I can, let me call a trusted contact. Yeah.
That's awesome. It totally makes sense. Let's shift gears and talk about AI. So I'm sure you guys have encountered some of these AI-related frauds that are out there. For example, you can generate a very good-looking fake ID from a LinkedIn photo in seconds. So those types of synthetic identity attacks are just one of many tools in the arsenal for bad actors. What are you guys seeing today on the fraud front that's keeping you up at night?
Well, that is a big part of it. I mean, at this point, fraud is so complex that people can create something so simple and you can't tell. And so when you're in the lending space and you're using credit data, if you have an applicant who's not who they say they are, but you've run the credit and it's pulled credit from someone who's not that person, there's a start. That's a, an FCRA violation. And then you have the person whom, again, you don't know, potentially getting through that. And then they're lending, they're getting through the lending process and potentially closing on a loan, and that money is gone. And so, it's stopping it up front. Gino's done presentation with Salesforce about how quickly you can create a driver's license, a fake driver's license. And
you showed him?
Yeah. He
nice.
Did a little demo, and it was one of the guys in the audience, was his picture on a fake Florida driver's license, and we're in Massachusetts. And so that is easy to do. And the way you stop that is to do the work up front. It's that know your customer. When we run that, it's going to validate the person, the address, name, social, and then when it gets to, and it does it off many different databases, but when it gets to the driver's license, you take a picture of it, you can't, they get that, and then you do a selfie, and that selfie it looks like it's just taking a picture, but it's a video. So the
where you turn your face and it kind of does the 3D biometric scan, and
it just knows that the technology knows that it's not somebody taking a picture of a picture, and that it's a live person, and that's how you match the driver's license or whatever the document is with the person. That photos should match, the data should match, all of that.
Got it. But what would you like? What are the sophisticated scams that you're seeing? Like, are you seeing anything else in addition to the synthetic identity that I mentioned? Customers that have bought it hook, line, and sinker, and they issued loans to someone in Nigeria, or
I have seen that actually. So this was 3 or 4 months ago, I think. And another part of what we do in the access portion isn't just credit, it's also integrating bank statement and income data. One of the clients that we onboarded to that specific product line had an instance where they received completely forged bank statements, pay stubs, and W-2s that were all basically AI generated. They didn't know the difference, and I think they gave that individual borrower a $50,000 loan or something. And after that disbursement happens, they disappear. With the money, and they're gone.
Painful.
Yeah, that whole demo that we did in Massachusetts, like Mike mentioned, it was live with one of the guys in the audience. You just throw it into Gemini, and this isn't like some special AI that we have access to. I just open Google and Gemini.
That's off the shelf.
Upload his LinkedIn photo and say, generate me a realistic Florida ID sitting on a scratched up coffee table, and make it look like I took the photo with my phone. And it did it to a T, indistinguishable from anything else. So if people are collecting, identity verification via an email, how easy is it to forge that? And now you apply that same concept to printed out bank statements, make it look like it's on a dinner table, or just generate straight up PDFs of forged documentation showing specific names, addresses, making it look like it's aligned. Or even that of a real person whose identity was stolen so that they can actually get a real credit file. It's kind of scary.
Wow. I feel like we're at the beginning of this, and these fraudsters are just devilishly creative on how they do this. Speaking of AI, talk to me about how you guys are integrating AI into how you build and manage your organization internally.
On the business side, it can do so many things, but one of the things in the development cycle is when we're looking at making changes, we want to add things, we want to change a UI, we can go into, we use Claude, and you can go in there and Claude can create what that UI is going to look like and then make some changes to it or things like that. It can do it so quickly, and we can say, all right, well, we like it, we need to move this, or, whatever it might be. And it can change it so quickly. So you can say, all right, now we have it. Now, it doesn't then automatically build that in Salesforce. Our developers work with the AI tools to help speed it up, but the app is, it's pretty big, and everything has to be any changes to it have to be done very carefully. So we're not letting, AI run wild on the development side, but it is certainly helpful.
So you're using it from like an ideation perspective, using it to build framework that your team can in turn maybe reverse engineer or back into?
Correct. And it can go in and look at our code, and it can make suggestions. If I want to, I love to ask Claude to do, how about if we could do this? And with the resources it has, it can go in and say what can be done. And then our developers will, take that and they'll create prototypes and things like that so we can see what it would ultimately look like.
Yeah, I think it's also helped a ton with documentation. Just being able to keep records of what has happened, organize them, whether that be from like a customer-facing knowledge base, also internally keeping track of all the support cases that we worked on, errors we've seen over the last 13 years. You can imagine that's a lot of potential, not so much issues with our app, but bureau codes that come back that nobody's ever heard of. Stuff like that we've solved for. Being able to organize it and research into it with the aid of AI has been awesome.
So from a support perspective.
Yeah. What Mike said, though, is pretty true. Our app is dealing with a lot of personally identifiable information. I don't think AI is at a point right now where you can trust it to just go in and make code changes to the app as its core. And then if you
living dangerously,
if you push the wrong update out to, you're working with however many hundreds of lenders across the US, one bad update or bad seed gets in there from something that our developers who have built it from the ground up, didn't expect, that opens up a lot of risk. And that's not risk that I don't think we'll ever be willing to take.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because
trust but verify.
And the trust in the app and the data is the utmost importance, because if people start seeing, well, this isn't coming across right, well, how can you trust credit decisions, when you got, hundreds of thousands of dollars going out the door if your data's not right? Like if you don't feel comfortable with it, that, people aren't going to use it.
Very fair. All right, gentlemen, as we wrap here, I'm just going to throw some rapid fire questions at you guys. So, Mike or Gino, what's one thing you guys would love to see every lender automate this year that most of them are still doing manually? Lightning round.
Yeah, I would say decisioning. That data comes in, it should be decisioned immediately. And more people just need to say, look at that, and not say, well, I like to review all this. You can decision so quick.
I'd say assets and income data. Get it in faster. Stop the manual upload.
Okay. All right. What's the single most important thing a lender should look for when evaluating a lending technology vendor?
Trust. You've got to know that those people, there's a lot of, developers that can write code, but creating an API from documentation or whatever it might be, you really have to have the background to know how the data is used or the process works, as opposed to just developers that can, write great code. And
yeah, I'd piggyback off that experience. You don't want some vibe coded something or another that was, strung together but made to look institutional. It's better to work with the people who have been working with it for ages, decades.
Okay, so talk to some good references.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if the vendors says, "Hey, what's that over there?" when you ask for references, maybe you want to look at somewhere else.
Exactly.
Okay, so you guys are 12, 13 years in here. If you could go back, Mike, to the beginning and tell yourself something, what would it be?
I would say, we have expanded our credit providers, and we did that very slowly, for years. If we'd have done that sooner, we could have been, served a lot more customers. If that's one thing I would go back and say, if I knew that, would have been helpful.
Okay. Hindsight's 2020.
Yes.
I would advise Mike for a touch of gray, but that's just me.
Funny guy.
Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can people learn more about what you're doing?
Website, lasercreditaccess.com, or they can always reach out to Mike and I.
Salesforce App Exchange.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks again, gentlemen.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure, Owen.